Right, hello Year 9 and welcome to the last section of the revision. This will be the last walking talking one before the summer holidays. So today we're going to go over the questions that were posted yesterday on bioenergetics, which includes photosynthesis and respiration. Please make sure that as we go through these, if you are making any mistakes, that you are correcting your work and looking at where it is that you went wrong. Please feel free to annotate your question papers on information about command words or what to do in those kind of questions and things like that. So once again, I've broken this down into two because some people it might take a little bit longer in terms of going through and making any corrections. So we're going to do questions 1 to 2 today, and then we'll do the question 3 and 4 tomorrow. So the first question that was given starts off with the diagram of a plant cell. So figure 1 shows a plant cell. You've got 3 of the structures that have been labelled on that plant cell. So you're probably already working out that you might be asked something about them. So question 1.1, draw one line from each part of the cell to its function, and it's worth 3 marks. The only tricky bit on here is they've given 4 options, so there's going to be one function that is not going to be used in this for your answer. So we'll start off with the nucleus, and I would suggest reading through the functions so that you know what the part of the cell will be as you come across them. So the functions are where most of the chemical reactions take place, absorbs light energy to make food, carries out respiration, and controls the activities of the cell. So out of those 4, the nucleus, hopefully we've all drawn a line from the nucleus to the bottom function, controls the activities of the cell, and that will be worth 1 mark. The next part of the cell is the chloroplasts, and hopefully we have drawn a line from the chloroplast to absorbs light energy to make food. That's where photosynthesis happens. And the last one, mitochondria, hopefully you've drawn a line from mitochondria to carries out respiration. So 1 mark for each of those is a simple matching up the key part of the cell to its function. So hopefully you're able to do that and get something that looks like this. Okay, question 1.2. Respiration takes place in the cell. Use a word from the list to complete the sentence. It is worth 1 mark. So you've even given 4 words, and the sentence is all cells use respiration to release, and the answer is energy. So both of those previous questions are straightforward stating or identifying parts, which will be about 40% of your exams when you are in year 11. They come under what is called assessment objective 1. Okay, slightly trickier now. We've got quite a long graph section on this one. Remember what I've said in previous ones. On average, it's about 20% in the science exams that will be math-based, and these would be the kind of questions you should expect to get. You will definitely have graph questions, either drawing graphs or reading from graphs in your exams, so it is important that we are comfortable with them. So the question says, an athlete did a 6-month training program. Figure 2 shows the effect of the same amount of exercise on his heart rate before and after the training program. So you've got 2 lines. One of them is for before the training program. One of them is after the training program. Going along the x-axis, we have the time going up in 5s. And on the y-axis, we have the heart rate in beats per minute. So the first question says, what was the minimum heart rate of the athlete before the training program? So we need to look at the solid line before training program, and we need to look at what the lowest heart rate is. So if we're reading it from this graph, we can go up to the lowest line, which is at the beginning between 0 and 5 minutes. And from that, we can take a reading from the y-axis. Now, it is important that we look at the scales and know what the scale is. So you've got 5 little boxes between 60 and 70. And if that means 10, then each little box is going to be worth 2. So if it is 2 little boxes above 60, it's going to be 64 beats in it. Question 2.2. Give 2 differences between the heart rate of the athlete before and after the training program. Now, it doesn't ask you to explain these differences. It's just asking you to state what the 2 differences are on the graph. And there's a few different answers you could give. So you could say that the resting heart rate, or the resting pulse, either way, resting heart rate is lower after the training program. Or you can say the resting heart rate is higher before the training program. That would be worth 1 mark. If you said that the heart rate is lower during exercise after the training program, or the heart rate is higher before the training program during exercise, that would also be worth 1 mark. You can also have said that the recovery time is less after the training program, or vice versa. You can say that the recovery time is longer before the training program. Either of those would be worth 1 mark, but it will be a maximum of 2 marks. Now, for that question, you are just reading from the graph. So if you get a question like this, or a question that asks you just to describe the graph, you just need to use the graph that is in front of you. You do not need to explain anything unless it's asking you to. Okay, 2.3. Which 2 substances need to be supplied to the muscles in large amounts during exercise? Choose 2 substances from the list. So during exercise, obviously, there's going to be lots of respiration. It's asking what needs to be supplied, not what's taken away, because a couple of the options from the list are things that are taken away during exercise. So what needs to be supplied is going to be glucose and oxygen. So if you circled those 2 answers, very well done. It is a mark for each. So if you've circled glucose and another option that is an oxygen, it will be worth 1 mark. Okay, so we're going back to the graphs now. And in this question, 2.4, it says use figure 2. Always look at what figure it's asking you to look at, because on this one it had a couple of graphs. So do make sure that you're using the right one. So use figure 2 to find the heart rate of the trained athlete 3 minutes after he stopped exercising. So you need to look at where they're exercising, and the exercising finishes at 15 minutes. So we need to go 3 minutes above 15, which will obviously be 18 minutes. So I've already drawn the line in for you, as you can see. If between 15 and 20, there are 10 boxes. So that means 2 boxes must be worth 1. So I've gone up to 18. So I've gone up 2, 4, 6 little boxes, and I've drawn a line up. So please make sure you have a pencil and ruler in your exams. And I've gone across, and you can see that from the y-axis is 1 little box below 70, And as we've already said, each little box is worth 2. And because they've got different scales, that can be confusing, and that is going to be something that students are easily going to slip up on. So do make sure you use the correct scales on each axis. So because it's one little box underneath, it means that it's going to be 68. So its heart rate is 68 beats per minute. Now this question is worth 1 mark, so it's not going to be anything complicated. It will literally just be taking a reading from the graph. Unlike the next question. So in this one, it gives you a little bit of information beforehand. So the stroke volume of the heart is the volume of blood pumped out of the left side of the heart in 1 heartbeat. Figure 3 shows the relationship between stroke volume and heart rate before and after the athlete did the training program. So this is our next graph. And going along the bottom, we've got the heart rate in beats per minute. And going along the y-axis, we've got stroke volume in centimeters cubed. And again, we have the after training program line, which is a solid line, and the before training program, which is the dotted line. So the question that it asks you says the cardiac output is calculated using the following equation. So it's giving you the equation. You just have to get the numbers and put it into the equation. Calculate the cardiac output of the athlete after training 8 minutes after the start of exercise, and use information from figure 2 and figure 3, and it's worth 2 marks. Now this is actually quite a complicated question to only be worth 2 marks. Normally I would expect it to be worth 3 marks on this, but we're going to go through the steps of what you needed to do because it is quite a tricky question and you are using both graphs. So the key bit from the question is that it's the after training, so we're only looking at the after training line, and it's 8 minutes after the start of exercise. So we need to make sure that we're doing it 8 minutes after the exercise. So I've gone to the first graph. This is step 1. So I've gone to the first graph, which is figure 2, and I need to find the heart rate after 8 minutes of exercise. So if they're starting exercise at 5 minutes, 8 minutes after that will be 5 plus 8, so it's going to be 13 minutes. So I've drawn my line up from 13 minutes, and I've gone to the after training program because that's what it said in the question, and I've read off that, and I get 136 beats per minute. So 5 minutes after exercise, the heart rate is 136 beats per minute for after the training program. Now that actually will get you 1 mark in the exam if you have nothing else correct. The next step, step 2, now that I know that it's 136 beats per minute, I can find the stroke volume at 136 beats per minute. So I've gone to the second graph and I've gone along the x-axis to 136. So on this scale, there are 5 little boxes between 130 and 140. So I know that each little box is going to be worth 2. So I've gone up 3 little boxes from 130 to get 136. I've gone up to the after training program, and I've gone along, and I couldn't get it quite straight enough when doing this on the PowerPoint, but it should read between 100 and 101, so it should be 100.5. And again, if you get everything else wrong on this, having that one reading will gain you 1 mark. Now to get both marks, you need to put those 2 numbers into the equation. So cardiac output is heart rate times stroke volume. So from the first graph, we got the heart rate, which was 136. And from the second graph, we got the stroke volume, which is 100.5. So if you multiply those two numbers together, you get 13,668. Any range between 130,000, that should be, not 13,000, 130,000 and 138,000 got you the 2 marks. So it was quite a nice range that they gave in this question for the answer. And that will just be people making faults when reading from the graph. You got 1 mark if you tried to multiply numbers that were taken from both graphs. So even if the number was well off 136 and 100.5, but you took 2 readings off the graph and multiplied them, that actually gained you 1 mark. But to get both marks, you had to go through the steps that I just went through. Okay, so this is the first section of the walking, talking mock done. Please make sure that you're happy with the answers in terms of what I've gone through, of how you would answer those. Please annotate your work so that in future you'll know what you need to do. And please make sure that your graph reading is done as accurately as you can, because even on this one, where they're giving you quite a big range, sometimes the range is very, very small and they expect you to be very, very precise. So please make sure that when you're doing these kinds of questions, that you are getting it as close to that true value as you possibly can. Tomorrow we're going to go through the second part of this paper, so that is all of the question 3s and all of the question 4s. And then like you have been doing, and I do appreciate it, thank you very much, send in your marks that you gained for this paper. Okay, so that is it for me. I know some of you skipped straight to the other one. I'll try and make sure that they're both uploaded at the same time. That's fine. But if you want to break it down into the 2, that's also absolutely fine. So thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely day, and you'll hear from me in the next video. Take care and goodbye.